because I had almost a cousin that old enough, he was like an uncle that was really into real estate. And I always looked at real estate more as it's like a long-term game.
Yeah.
I always thought real estate is like 15, 20, 25 year type thing. The people that I've seen in my mind have the most success with it. But really, these are like almost like 25 years. You're going to be successful at whatever you do. You know what I'm saying? But especially with real estate, it's not a quick flip. And that's what was so unique around that time of 2008, 2006, 2007. Like, I was seeing people my age like, yeah, I'm flipping houses now. And I'm like, word? You know what I'm saying? And now I'm seeing sort of that kind of come back again where I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know interest rates will rise, which they have now. And this is going to impact, how homes are being bought.
Well, it's a cycle, right? And no one can think that real estate, really any asset, but real estate especially, will keep going up in value in perpetuity, like forever. That's not how economics works, right? So we always hit the cycle. And even sophisticated real estate investors seem to have amnesia because people start making really, really crazy decisions at the top of the market for some reason. But the market will always self-correct or crash. We are in the self-correction, right? So interest rates are going up. I mean, we will start to see a lot of this, these institutional investors who are trying to buy up as much cheap property as possible. These skyrocketing home prices that we've seen, there's going to be an adjustment, right, as the economy shifts. So, I mean, we're in this, we're the market sort of reached a peak and we're beginning to come down.
Now, as you look at some of these institutional investors, specifically in homes, I definitely just want your opinion on it. How do we fix that? And I guess I shouldn't even say how do we fix that. Whose role is it to advocate for that family, that single home buyer, the person that wants to buy one house from the Land Bank Authority, get it fixed up? Like, whose role is that? Is that a government thing?
It is.
Is that a community thing? Is that a businesses and real estate thing? Like,
the community is doing it, right? The community we have the advocates in the community, right? If you look at community development organizations, right? So I won't even name them, but I mean, we have CDOs throughout the city, some that have been around forever, some that are newer, but they are advocating for Black Detroit homebuyers in neighborhoods to have access to the single family starter home, right? The land bank, their goal is inventory management. And what I mean by that is that they have so many homes still. I think they have about 17,000 now, which is down from some crazy amount that they had before. 17,000 homes. The interim director, who has now become the director, even was quoted in either the Free Press or the News as saying, we don't have enough capital as the land bank, as an institution, to manage all of these properties long term, right? The goal is to get them off of the books. So what that means is quick sales. Like, they need to get the inventory down. That is not the strategy for first-time home buyers or, low-income home buyers in the city of Detroit. Like, that's not the strategy that works for most people. And when you have community advocates who are trying to create new structures to get those land bank homes and rehab them and get the financing and get a home buyer in it, the land bank is not always the easiest partner. So it's at the community level, the advocacy is already there. It's a governmental response that we need to see. And honestly, this current administration has not been focused on single family housing, right? We have a lot of affordable housing that's was set to expire. So for those, when housing receives subsidy from the federal government, you have to keep it affordable for a certain period of time. That was expiring for like 10,000 units in the city of Detroit. Okay. So Mayor Duggan.
Let me explain let me go a little bit
deeper. Sure.
The developer won't speak. So let me break this down for you guys. All right. And it's a classic back and forth. I remember Andrea Isom. Well, no. It wasn't Andrea Isom. It was because she represents the mayor, but she used to be on television. And she was speaking to this challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So, but basically, so you all understand how government subsidies work. And this is why I also argue to a lot of my friends that as much as people talk about America's based on capitalism, it is not straight capitalism in America, because government subsidies really create welfare institutions for, as far as I'm concerned, corporations. Now, as Chase just presented, some of these subsidy-based programs definitely empower communities, but some of them definitely deprive communities too. Mm-hmm. So like, i.e. NFL stadiums or something, you know what I'm saying? So, developers at certain points in time, especially like when we think of what happened in New York City at one point in time when things hit, New York City went bankrupt at one point in time. Mayor Koch, President Gerald Ford was like, I ain't giving New York no money. You know, that was a reality in New York. So things would happen as for developers, it's like, okay, well, we can give you some subsidies, meaning that you're gonna pay less money, pay less in taxes. You're gonna pay less in taxes. We're gonna basically cover some of these costs, like New York City, or bond this out and give you some money over time. But in exchange, you're gonna allow, of your 100-unit building, 50 of them will be affordable or low income housing. So those 50 that'll be low income housing, technically, because it's mixed use housing, is like, okay, you're going to keep this property up to par. And this will be a 30-year agreement. So for 30 years or 20 years, I'm just saying 30, you're going to keep this in low-income, affordable housing units. So this is kind of where people say, oh, man, you got one of them rent-control apartments in New York or this city or that city. Detroit had many of them. A timetable is ticking on many of those properties. Mm-hmm. Chase just presented 10,000 of those units
in Detroit
are going off those rolls. So what happens when things go off those rolls is a couple of things start happening. One, closer to those things going off the rolls, you'll see these properties that probably have not had a lick of paint in them in 20 years. These properties will start getting paint. Repaving parking lots, because just the whole interest of knowing that you can maximize the value of where these tenants will stay is about to exponentially go up in a year or two. Now you can refinance. You can get lending against what your property is if you're the person that owns that property or wants to sell that property. Basically, you took money from the government to assist the city or the people, citizens of the land or under the government and now that time transitions, and now this is just a for-profit project. Mm-hmm. One of the big key things, and man, this is really Alexis Wiley. That's who it was.
Got it. Yep.
Alexis Wiley, that was on the Channel 2 News, but now works was working with Mayor Duggan at the time, gave a presentation on like, yeah, it was this property right there at the corner of, what's crazy is right behind where U of M Detroit's office was. Mm-hmm. I forget the name of that property project, but it was just even known as a project where this was definitely ousting out so many of the people that couldn't afford to live there. And the property group was... it was negotiated where certain tenants would be able to stay and certain tenants wouldn't be able to stay. And I remember Alexis stood up and said, we're still going to work with this developer, but now they know how to do business with the city. And I was like, how did this person even in the room still? You know what I'm saying? They were about to kick out, like, I want to say maybe about 120 seniors, just like something gross and grotesque. So I'm giving that to the people playing so you recognize the way that some of these balances and deals happen. So as these 10,000 units now transition for basically market rate, what happens to those 10,000 renters?
So here's where I can be super critical of the administration often, but they have done work in this space. So they've they made it a priority to preserve those 10,000 units, right? So this is the juxtaposition between, what's happening in the single family space versus these multi-unit dwellings, these apartment buildings. They wanted to keep as many of those affordable units as possible. So they did negotiate with some of the landlords, et cetera. To date, they've probably maintained about 6,000 to 7,000 of the 10, right? So that's a pretty good track record.
That is.
The city doesn't have, and that's a clear plan that the city put in place. You can Google it. It's been in place for years. Like, they talk about it. Alexis was on TV talking, right? Like, this is something that the city talks about. When you ask them what their single family plan is, there is no coherent plan, right? And there has not been. So that's the difference. It is the majority of housing in the city of Detroit. It's over 75% of our housing is single family, but we don't have a coherent plan for it. So when you say, whose role is it to advocate for, the single family home buyer, it is the government, but our current government doesn't have a clear, coherent plan for the majority of our housing type. It's absurd. It's absurd.
What would a plan like that look like?
So we have subsidy, right? We just got over $800 million in ARPA funding, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have subsidy available to us that we are not applying at the scale that we need, right? So I'll give you an example. The $250 million bond, proposal in that passed 2 years ago, give or take.
Yep.
So we're demolishing 8,000 homes. We are basically boarding up another 8,000. So we're patching roofs, we're securing doors, and we're getting trash out. Like, that's what that money is used for. It's not to rehab the home, right? It's to stabilize it in the hopes that, again, the land bank can sell it and get it off their books. Exactly.
Like, it's like kicking the can on possible what would happen, but then the person that buys that property, it could be like a it's like, what's that, storage wars or something, because they could be walking in a place like when you walk in your building.
Yeah.
It's like they boarded it up, now open it up, and oh man, it's a whole tree growing in my house.
Which is a thing that could actually happen in Detroit. So that's one of the strategies, right? Like, let's just board it up and hope that someone else can pay for the rehab, instead of using the dollars that we have for those infrastructure fixes. So we are putting money towards housing, but it's apartment buildings.